This is the last workshop for the Community Wildfire Prevention Grant Program. This meeting is being recorded and you can view it at a later date. This is, like I said, the last one. The important workshop to watch is the first workshop if you haven't already. They are posted to our website and on our YouTube page. The first workshop is more of an overview on the process and the grant. It's required to watch to apply for a project ID. And these last three workshops that we've put on over the last month, not including the first one, are more kind of in-depth, deep dives into the process. And so this will wrap up that deep dive and hopefully give people some strategies for application writing to our grant program. I think everybody's muted. Cameras are off. If you have questions, just go ahead and throw them in the chat and we'll get them all answered at the end. This will be a shorter workshop than the rest. We don't have a ton to cover today. But we're going to go through kind of the application process and submission process, mapping, and we'll talk kind of best practices and common mistakes with grant writing and project development. So again, there is kind of a 4-step process here for the application. The first step is to download and read the procedural guide from our website. We put a lot of time and love into the procedural guide to make things very clear for people. And trust me, we can tell when people don't read the procedural guide. The procedural guide is for you. It is there to help you through the process. It explains everything in detail and answers a lot of the questions that people ask me in follow-up kind of phone calls or consultations. So if you have not read the procedural guide, you have to read that, understand it. It will help you through the process. We basically give you the full answers to the test as best we can to walk you through the process and make sure that you can be successful. The second step, after you read the procedural guide and watch the first recording, is to request a project ID. That again is on our website. Once you complete a project ID, you're assigned a unique project ID number that you'll use throughout the process. And you'll receive an online application link via email once you complete that project ID request form. Once you submit that request form, you'll also have an opportunity to set up a consultation with me. You can set up as many consultations as you like. Consultation is strongly recommended. It's not always required, but it is required if you're going to ask Truckee Fire to act as lead agency under CEQA. The third step would be to download the application workbook. Again, the application workbook is on our webpage. You want to use that workbook offline to draft your answers to the prompts. You want to spend time on this document. You want to develop well-articulated answers following the procedural guide, following the evaluation criteria. You cannot rush through the application. You need to spend time on it. It is your main opportunity to present a competitive project to the district. The fourth step would be to complete the online application, which again is sent to you via a link. You can copy and paste your drafted answers from the workbook over to the online application, attach all of the required documents that are stated, and submit no later than 5 p.m. on Friday, April 17th. Again, it is an online application only. It must be submitted through the online application form, and you must attach all supporting documents to the online application form. We will not accept emailed or hand-delivered applications. We will not review them. No late submissions will be accepted, so we'll talk about best practices. You should aim to get your application submitted 24 hours before the due date. generally a good practice, just in case there's issues with the submission or the upload, or if there's computer issues day of. You don't want to be in a situation where you have a completed application and you miss that 5 p.m. deadline. We will, even if it's a second late, you're not going to be able to submit it because the application will close. So what is in the application? This is a quick rundown, and we'll kind of go through the application together today. But you have a project summary, contact information, including the project applicant and who is the project manager. We request project information and a map. So a map is a required attachment regardless of your project. There's a scope of work section. There's a collaboration and local support section, readiness section. You can see in here what we're asking for each of those sections. We'll go through this, but before we do, I just want to reiterate that the sections of the application are directly tied to specific evaluation factors in the procedural guide. And if you're wondering what goes into these things, we've listed the workshops on which they were presented. So if you are questioning what collaboration and local support looks like or project readiness, you should go to our website and watch the recording on that date. We talk about it in depth and probably answer most questions in those workshops as far as what the specifics are for each of these evaluation criteria. However, there should be no question about what we're looking for, and let's look at that real quick. So we're going to start with the procedural guide. This is the truckeefire.org/grants webpage. All of the recordings are posted here on our YouTube page. We have office hours coming up for people to have their questions answered. There's a program summary. You want to live in the resources tab if you are an applicant. Okay, and the procedural guide is the first thing. Again, you are required to read this document. It will help you. Let's take a look at this real quick. We tried to condense this thing, but again, as you scroll through towards the bottom, this is laying out everything for you. Application requirements and evaluation criteria. Okay. As you're working through your workbook for your online application, you want to have this open so that you can see what we're asking for, and this will help your process. Summarize the project. What type of project are you proposing? What is the location? Who is the applicant? Attach your map. And we'll talk about maps a little later today. The scope of work, again, tied directly to the application. It's worth 10 points. We give you the evaluation criteria very clearly. And then we tell you basically how to answer this section of the application. We give it to you in bullets on what exactly we are looking for. And it's good practice when writing grants to make sure you are hitting all of these points. So we're looking for background and statement of need, what your goals and objectives are, what does the site look like now, what do you want it to look like when you're done, is your project going to reduce wildfire risks, what are your deliverables, measurable, quantifiable metrics, what is your implementation plan. All of that is wrapped into the scope of work. It's all worth 10 points. So make sure you're checking these boxes. Collaboration and local support's worth 10 points. We give you the evaluation criteria. We talk about match and how much points match is worth. So you'll remember in the past workshops, grant writing is all about maximizing your points. So letters of support, letters of commitment. This is all very clearly spelled out for folks to help assist you through the process. And we won't go through every single one, but you'll see that every one is listed here with the amount of points it's worth and what we're evaluating you on. So very important that you understand this. Let's look at the workbook here is under the next resources tab. This is something that you can save offline and work on. And we'll talk about this real quick. There are, you want to work through this, draft your answers, and have them ready to copy and paste into the application. If you are not proposing a forest fuels reduction project, so if you're selecting a community wildfire preparedness project or a prevention education project, just keep in mind as you're working through this, these green boxes are specific to forest fuels reduction projects only. So your life is a little bit easier if you're not proposing a forest fuels reduction project, but the other two, as you work through this, ignore the green boxes. So you don't need a registered professional forester. If you're not doing a forest fuels reduction project, you don't need to worry about that section. Don't need to worry about environmental compliance. But you can see again, we list it very clearly here, and this is how the application looks online. And the application is dynamic. So let's take a look at that real quick. So the application, as we work through it, it's going to ask for what your project ID is. That is emailed to you and assigned. What your title is. And what you are requesting financially. So how much money are you requesting from the grant? How much match are you bringing? Cash match or in kind? And what is the total cost of the project with grant request plus matching costs? Give us a brief project description. We're only looking for 100 words. And this is where it gets dynamic. So who is the applicant? So the applicant is the person who is signing the agreement with Truckee Fire. That can be the same person or it can be different than the project manager. So the project manager can be the same person as the applicant, or you can elect to have someone else manage your project and you be the signer. As you work through this, oh, it's going to make me fill this out before I can go. Gotcha. I'm going to say I'm a private non-industrial landowner. This isn't going to work out how I wanted. Well, anyways, this is kind of how it looks online. So you can save and continue later if you so choose, but just know that like I cannot guarantee that your application is going to be saved. I don't know how that works with the job form. So it's recommended you use the application workbook first, go through it, and then fill stuff out as you go. The dynamic pieces that I'm talking about is if I select a project other than forest fuels reduction, these are going to go away. If I select forest fuels reduction in the application, you will see these prompts in green pull up. I'm not going to spend the time working through all of this application, but this is generally how it looks. It's not going to let you go forward until you can, fill out everything on this page. What else do we want to work through? I think that's the quick and dirty run through of the procedural guide, the workbook, and the application. 15 minutes in, we're going to be out early today. Project mapping is required, so all projects must have a map. General map should be in PDF format, 8.5 by 11, standard piece of paper, and show enough of the surrounding area to clearly show the location and extent of the project. Projects that do not include vegetation management, so wildfire preparedness, education, or forest fuels reduction projects with the equipment purchase only, you still need to provide a map, but it can be a very simple map, just kind of showing the general area where the project will take place, kind of with the pin dropped. We don't expect anybody to be experts in map making. We have resources available at Truckee Fire to help you make your map. And that's usually where we start with people when they reach out is, hey, let's make a map real quick and start the conversation there and work from there. So there's no issue with Truckee Fire, myself, making you a map for your project, working through the process with you to make sure that that map reflects what the community wants completed. So some best practices with grant writing and grants in general. You want to really make sure you're aligning your project with the program priorities. How do you do that? Well, you read the procedural guide thoroughly and you understand what are we, focused on as our priorities. We are focused on measurable wildfire risk reduction and community resilience. There are several example projects that we give you. Those are not an exhaustive list. I would be happy to meet with anybody at any time to discuss your project and give you kind of strategies and ideas on how to make it align with the grant program priorities. You also, with every grant in process, you want to clearly define the problem that you are addressing. So what is it, a wildfire hazard? Is it a community or evacuation risk? Is it a gap in community understanding, or resources available to the community? And this is kind of part of stating your goals and objectives. Like, hey, here's the problem. Here are the goals and objectives to solve the problem. You want to focus, especially with this grant program, on community scale benefits. This is a community wildfire prevention fund, right? So we are going to be prioritizing projects that provide greater community benefits and protect communities, not just individual properties. That's why we have a collaboration section, and that's why when you speak with me and work with me, we're constantly trying to figure out who can we involve in the project to make this bigger, better for the community, involve multiple landowners, and design something that is strategic and meaningful to Truckee Fire as well. I think maybe there's some project ideas out there. While it would be beneficial for the individual property to get the work done, that's great, but it's not necessarily the intent of this grant program. We want projects focused on community scale benefits. You want to be specific and measurable in your narration. So you want to quantify as much as possible: acres treated, miles cleared, numbers of people benefiting, numbers of whatever we're trying to accomplish with this grant. We need to make sure that there is metrics that we can gauge the success of the project. Okay, you also want to demonstrate project readiness, which we've talked about. So that's having permits ready to go, environmental compliance ready to go or close to, getting, contractor quotes or understanding what the cost per acre is so that you can have a realistic budget, and having your agreements in place. For you, that means having your letters of commitment in place with the people that we're working with. Another important part of this project is leveraging partnerships and match funding. So again, it's a community fund. There is not an unlimited amount of funding. And we really want this program to be a way for us to get more done together. So HOA contributions from budgets, volunteer time management with the grant and in-kind or cash match from the landowners is important. I think we all understand at this point that nothing in this world is free, and if we want to be competitive in these grants that are very, I would say, oversubscribed, and we usually get twice as much funding requested than we have available, you really need to be thinking about what financial commitments can be made to make your project stand out. And of course, you need to follow the instructions and submit a complete, well-organized application. If you don't think we can't tell that you haven't read the procedural guide and you rush through the process, we can. It's very obvious. Usually when you get a shotgunned application, it's something that you can tell not a lot of effort was put into, and that's not going to compete very well against some other applications where people have put significant amount of time into. Some top grant application mistakes that we have seen in our 4 years of offering this program to the community is projects that have kind of an unclear or vague project scope. Remember that I personally, and Truckee Fire, we do not review, score, rank, and select projects. We bring in a outside interagency team from representatives from Nevada County, Placer County, town of Truckee, maybe a local nonprofit organization that we bring in to help us review, rank, and select projects. If the reviewers can't understand what you are proposing and what will actually be completed with public funding, um, it's not it's confusing, right? They don't have any background information on your project. I know when you work with me specifically, I have a lot of background on your project, which is why I don't participate in the evaluation. If I did, I think there would be some biases introduced, and we don't want that. So you need to be clear with your project scope. Another grant application mistake that we've seen repeat over the years is requesting funding for services already provided by Truckee Fire through Measure T. And so it's important to design your project in a way that does not duplicate or provide a service that we're already providing. And those are more nuanced type grants sometimes that people are trying to get creative with an application. And I would just encourage people, if you are not feeling like the grant program is going to meet your needs and your community has a specific need, that's why we're here and that's why we have Measure T, so we can understand what the community needs, make adjustments, and see where we can support communities through various types of services. A grant application that I see quite often is, this is kind of going back to being unclear or vague, is writing for yourself instead of the reviewer. So this is like when people assume that the reviewers just know the project area or the technical details. And again, just remember that's not the case. These people come into the room and they have no background knowledge on your project. And your opportunity to convince them to fund your project is through your application, your scope of work, and the narrative that you provide. A common one we see is lack of measurable outcomes. So again, we need to know what success looks like if we're going to fund a project with your tax dollars. So if we don't have clear metrics, kind of quantifying that or showing us how we can judge your project, if it's going to be successful or not, or if it's successful when we're completed, it's hard for us to justify funding. Incomplete, last minute, and poorly organized applications happen a lot. This is why we put so much effort into the procedural guide. This is why we offer 4 workshops, and this is why we offer consultation and office hours, so that you can work through this and have a complete application that is clear, realistic, and you are following the instructions. And that is on you as the grant applicant. Again, it goes back to understanding the procedural guide, reading that, tailoring your project to our priorities. Another thing I see people do is kind of try to answer prompts without looking at the evaluation criteria. So we just went through that. It's on the procedural guide, and you want to tailor your project to how it will be scored. And you want to answer those prompts as specifically and direct as you can, checking all those boxes on what we're asking for. All right, to wrap this up, again, the application is all online. There are no hard copies. We will not accept hard copies or emailed copies. I think it's important for people to embrace this process. It will take time, but I always tell people I don't feel like it's a waste of time ever, even if you're not successful with getting grant funding. It's very easy for us to identify hazards and say, hey, that needs work, or we need to do something here. But the process that we've laid out here over the last month through these workshops is we're really trying to bring our community along with us on how this type of stuff goes, how we go about project planning and funding projects. And these processes are things that we as a mountain community and mountain people, I think need to be aware of and be comfortable with. Like we can't just ask for money anytime we need work done. We need to develop something that is competitive, compelling, and understand that this opportunity that Truckee Fire is offering um, through the local funding that we have is not something that is offered in other places of the country. Like this is a very unique grant opportunity that really doesn't exist elsewhere in terms of the volume, the amount of funding that we're offering, the types of projects that we're funding. And so I just ask people like embrace the process. Don't rush through it. It's not something you can rush through. It's okay to check yourself at some point where if you have a project idea, but it's not very well developed and you don't have enough time to figure it out by April, like it's okay to work through that process through the season this year in 2026 and get support for the work, understand what needs to be done, develop the project, and then you're ready to submit in 2027 and your life's a lot easier. Of course, we want everybody who wants to apply to be able to apply. So we try to make this an accessible program, but there is a process for obvious reasons, right? This is public funding. We need to make sure that people can work through this and that we can, you know, award public funding to responsible parties that are going to complete projects that provide community benefits and increases our ability to get work done in the Truckee Donner Summit area. Project applications again are due on Friday, April 17th at 5 p.m. Good practice is to submit your application at least 24 hours in advance. Waiting until the last minute is not always the best call. We all know there's computer issues that come up, there's Wi-Fi issues that come up. So get it in early if you're ready to get it in early, but don't wait until 4:30 p.m. to try to start figuring out how to fill out the online application to get it submitted. Get it done in advance. Again, we'll have regular office hours and consultations available to help people through this process. And this program is meant for you all in this community, so we're here to help you through it. There are other programs that we've talked about in the past. There's a micro grant program from the county. There's a local cost share programs through the state and also from the federal government. And if you have questions about these programs, I encourage you to reach out to me and we can discuss what those look like. Again, we have office hours coming up. Sign up for them. This is your time to ask any questions that you have specific to your project or the process, and we can get those answered in real time. You want to live in the grants page with the resources tab like we talked about. We have contact information here. We're readily available to help you. With that, I heard the chat going off, so we'll take a look at the chat. But Brittany, are there any specific questions that you weren't able to answer?
Yeah, Dillon, could you show some example project maps and discuss key elements of them?
I did that in a previous workshop, but I think that's something that we can work on one-on-one with people since I'm usually the one making the maps. But I did talk about that, I think, in the first workshop where I showed a couple project maps and talked about those elements that were positive. But of course, I'm usually the one making the maps for people because we're that's a good way to go about it, just to make sure that's not a barrier for people. And we can talk about that individually per project on what the best way to do that.
Yeah, David, if you have specific questions, feel free to reach out separately. All of the other questions I was able to answer. I see that Julie is typing, so we'll let her get her question in. Letters of support states they should be on entity's letterhead. I was thinking more of individual HOA members to write letters. Dillon, can you speak to that?
Yeah, that's fine, Julie. Obviously, a private person isn't going to have a letterhead, so just kind of structure it as a standard kind of business letter, if that makes sense. And we do have template letters on our website, again, under the resources tab. So you can kind of look at those template letters and no, don't worry about the entity's letterhead. I should probably change that in the procedural guide. Thanks for that question, Julie. If you have any questions, you can also raise your hand, folks, and we'll unmute you and you can ask in real time if you desire.
Vanessa asked, can we reach out and get assistance outside of office hours?
Yeah, that's part of the consultation that's made available to you. So if you want to set up a consultation with Truckee Fire, you just fill out that project ID form. If you're not ready to fill out a project ID form, you can email me and we can set up a consultation. But there's a couple ways to go about that. You can either go through the bookings page that I have available, or you can reach out to me directly through the grants email or my personal or my work email, which is, yeah, Brittany just threw the grants email in the chat there. So if you're not ready to do a project ID and you're more thinking about maybe a new idea that you're trying to develop, reach out to me through that grants and we can set up a meeting. That's no problem. Any other questions? Raise your hand if you want. If not, we'll give you guys another couple minutes to type anything in. Again, these workshops might be a little out of context if you haven't watched the full series or if you haven't watched the first one specifically. So I do recommend spending some time looking at those. It'll help you with the process and help you understand the program. With that, seeing no additional questions, we'll go ahead and conclude our last workshop. I see Ann typing. We can wait for that. I appreciate everybody's time. I know that it's a commitment to get through this process, and we appreciate everybody's time and effort spent to try to work through this for your communities. Usually it takes the it kind of feels like a school project sometimes where one person's taking on a bulk of the work to try to get something for the community. But again, we're very thankful for the community's participation in this project. So thank you for attending and reach out with any questions or consultations as needed.